The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning when most of the world was still waking up to their regular lives. It came as a beam of light, hitting the satellite dishes of the United Earth Defense Command headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Admiral was drinking his third cup of coffee when his assistant rushed into the room with a pale face and shaking hands. "Sir, you need to see this right now," the young officer said. Followed him to the main control room where dozens of screens displayed the same thing. Alien symbols were slowly changing into English words, letter by letter, as if the message itself was learning how to speak to them. "You have been granted an audience before the Galactic Council of Unified Species," the message read. "Your primitive civilization will present itself for evaluation and integration protocols. Compliance is expected. Resistance is illogical." Read the message 3 times. He had spent 40 years serving in various militaries around the world before Earth unified its defense forces 5 years ago. He had seen many things in his long career. He had faced enemies who thought they were unbeatable, but this was something entirely different. Within 3 hours, every major leader on Earth was connected through secure video channels. President Collins sat in the White House Situation Room, her face calm but her eyes showing the weight of what they were all facing. Leaders from China, Russia, India, Brazil, and dozens of other nations filled the screens around her. "Ladies and," President Collins began, "we have spent our entire existence as a species wondering if we were alone in this vast universe. Today we received our answer. We are not alone. The question now is simple but terrifying. What kind of neighbors do we have?" The intelligence teams had been working non-stop since the message arrived. They had traced its source to a massive structure orbiting Neptune, hidden from Earth's telescopes by technology far beyond anything humans had ever created. The station had apparently been there for hundreds of years, watching humanity grow from simple farmers to space explorers. Commander Lisa Grant stepped forward to present her findings. She was the head of Earth's First Contact Division, a department that most people thought was a waste of money until this morning. "Based on our analysis of the message," Grant explained, "we are dealing with a very old and very powerful civilization. The way they wrote to us tells us a lot about how they think. They used words like granted and primitive. They expect us to obey without question. My guess is that they have done this many times before with other species. They have never met anyone who said no." The room was silent as everyone absorbed this information. General Victor, a man known for never showing fear, leaned forward in his chair with a slight smile on his weathered face. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "it is time they met humanity." The decision to send a delegation was made within days, but choosing who would represent all of humanity was much harder. After much debate, Ambassador Daniel was selected to lead the team. He was 62 years old with gray hair and kind eyes that hid a sharp mind. He had spent 30 years negotiating with the most difficult people on Earth. Now he would try his skills on beings from the stars. Dr. Helen Park joined him as the team's language expert. She had studied every form of communication known to humanity, from ancient symbols to modern codes. If anyone could understand how aliens thought based on how they spoke, it was her. Captain Samuel Torres completed the team. His official role was listed as ceremonial guard, but everyone knew the truth. Torres was one of the most dangerous soldiers Earth had ever produced. If things went wrong, he would be their last line of defense. The ship that would carry them was called the ESV Horizon. It was not Earth's most advanced vessel, but it was reliable and fast. The crew of 50 had volunteered knowing they might never return home. On the morning of departure, came to see them off personally. He shook his hand firmly and looked into his eyes. "I know what they are asking us to give up," said. "Our resources, our people, our freedom, everything we have built, everything we are." Nodded slowly. "I read the full list of their demands, Admiral. They want us to become slaves in everything but name." "So what are you going to tell them?" Smiled, but there was steel behind the expression. I am going to tell them no, and then I am going to explain what happens to anyone who tries to take from humanity what we are not willing to give. The horizon left Earth's orbit as millions of people watched from below. Some prayed, some cried, some raised their fists to the sky in defiance. Humanity had always been a species that fought against impossible odds. They had survived ice ages that killed most life on their planet. They had survived diseases that wiped out half their population. They had survived wars that could have ended their civilization forever. Now they faced their greatest test. The journey to the council station took 11 days. During that time, and his team prepared for every possible situation. They studied what little they knew about alien species. They practiced responses to threats and insults. They ran through scenarios where everything went wrong. Dr. Park spent hours analyzing the original message, finding hidden meanings in every word choice. They think we are animals, she told one evening. Smart animals, perhaps, but animals nonetheless. They have probably seen hundreds of species like us, young civilizations just reaching the stars. In their eyes, we are children who need to be controlled for our own good. And what do you think? Asked. Park looked at him with fire in her eyes. I think they have made a very serious mistake. They looked at our planet and saw our wars, our conflicts, our struggles against each other. They probably think we are weak because we fight among ourselves, but they miss the most important thing about humanity. What is that? We always fight. We never stop. We never surrender. We never accept that something is impossible. She paused. And when we are threatened by an outside force, we stop fighting each other and unite against the common enemy. Considered her words carefully. She was right. Throughout human history, nothing brought people together faster than a shared threat. Countries that had been enemies for centuries would become allies overnight when something bigger threatened them all. The Council had made a mistake by demanding submission. They had given humanity something they had not had in generations. A reason to stand together. As the horizon approached the massive council station, stood at the observation window and watched the structure grow larger. It was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. A ring of metal and light that could hold 1 billion beings. A monument to power that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. He felt small looking at it, small and insignificant. But he also felt something else, something that had carried humanity through every challenge they had ever faced. He felt ready to fight. The docking port where the horizon landed was located in the lowest section of the station. It was reserved for what the Council called emerging civilizations. In simple terms, it was the place where they put species they considered unimportant. The message was clear before even stepped off the ship. Humans were at the bottom of the ladder. The corridors leading from the dock were designed to make visitors feel small. The ceilings rose so high that could barely see the top. The walls were covered with massive holographic images showing Council warships destroying enemy fleets, Council soldiers crushing rebellions on distant worlds, Council flags flying over conquered planets. Every image told the same story. The Council always won. Resistance was pointless. Submit or be destroyed. Dr. Park walked beside her, eyes taking in every detail. This is psychological warfare, she whispered. They want us afraid before we even enter the chamber. Is it working? Captain Torres asked from behind them, his hand resting casually near his weapon. Not even a little bit, replied. Their escort was a tall alien with blue skin and 6 eyes arranged in a circle around his head. He had introduced himself as protocol officer, and he clearly thought guiding humans was beneath his station. He walked quickly, forcing them to hurry to keep up, another small insult in a long line of them. The High Tribunal does not appreciate waiting, said without looking back. You will speak only when addressed. You will bow when entering and leaving. You will accept whatever terms are offered with gratitude. Is this understood? Smiled politely, Understood. Glanced back with suspicious eyes, but said nothing more. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space had ever seen. It was shaped like an ancient Roman amphitheater, with hundreds of tiered seats rising up on all sides. Each section was filled with different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Creatures with tentacles, beings made of what looked like living crystal, entities that seemed to exist partially in another dimension. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform where the accused, or in this case the evaluated, were expected to stand. Above this platform, on thrones carved from some kind of glowing stone, sat the 5 members of the High Tribunal. High Chancellor dominated the center throne. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with silver skin that reflected the chamber's light like a mirror. He had 4 arms, and each one moved independently as if they had their own thoughts. His eyes were completely black, showing no emotion, no hint of what he was thinking. "Humans of Earth's voice boomed through the chamber without any visible technology. You stand before the supreme authority of the known galaxy. Your world has been observed and you are species 7431. You will now receive your integration orders." Walk to the center platform with slow, deliberate steps. He did not bow. Behind him, Park and Tors took their positions, standing straight with their heads held high. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the small human who had just broken the first and most important rule. "Did you not hear Protocol Officer?" asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "You will bow before the tribunal." Looked up at the massive alien without flinching. "With respect, High Chancellor, I bow to no one, neither does humanity." A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. This was not how things were done. This was not how they had ever been done. Species that came before the council showed proper respect. They accepted their place in the natural order. They did not stand before the tribunal like equals. His black eyes seemed to darken further. "You will address the council with proper deference, human. Your species classification requires you to surrender 60% of your planetary resources, provide 12 million workers for colonial labor forces, and disband your military capabilities. In exchange, you will receive protection and the privilege of existing within our borders." Dr. Park leaned close to and whispered quick translations of the subtle meanings behind words. Colonial labor forces meant slavery. Protection meant control. Privilege of existing meant they could take that privilege away whenever they wanted. Had known what they would demand. He had read the reports. He had prepared for this moment for 11 days straight. But hearing the words spoken out loud in this chamber of power and arrogance, something changed inside him. He was no longer nervous. He was angry. "The people of Earth have considered your generous offer," said, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We decline." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Aliens of all shapes and sizes rose from their seats, shouting in dozens of different languages. Some demanded the human's execution. Others laughed as if they had witnessed the greatest joke in galactic history. A few simply stared in confusion, unable to process what had just happened. High Chancellor raised all 4 of his arms and the chamber fell silent instantly. His authority over these species was absolute. When he commanded quiet, they obeyed without question. "Perhaps the translation was flawed," said slowly. "No species has ever refused integration. In 10,000 years, not once has a civilization rejected the Council's offer. You do not seem to understand your position, human. You are small. You are weak. You are nothing compared to the power assembled in this chamber." Took a step forward. Just one small step, but it carried the weight of his entire species behind it. "Oh, we understand our position perfectly," he replied. "You see us as another resource to exploit, another civilization to absorb into your empire, another group of beings to work and die for your comfort. But you have made a critical miscalculation, High Chancellor. Leaned forward on his throne, his 4 hands gripping the armrests. And what miscalculation is that? You have assumed we are afraid of you. The chamber was completely still. Even the most alien beings present could recognize the challenge in its words. You have watched our planet for centuries, continued. You have seen our wars. You have seen us fight each other over land, over resources, over beliefs. You probably think this makes us weak, divided, easy to control. He shook his head slowly. You could not be more wrong. Dr. Park watched as spoke, feeling pride swell in her chest. This was why he had been chosen, not because he was the or the most powerful, but because he understood something fundamental about humanity that no alien observation could capture. Those wars you watched taught us something, said. They taught us how to fight, how to survive, how to win against impossible odds. Every conflict in our history has made us stronger, harder, more determined. We have faced extinction more times than we can count, and we are still here. Silver skin seemed to ripple with barely contained rage. You dare lecture the Council on survival? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have crushed rebellions that span entire star systems. We have weapons that can shatter planets. And yet, replied calmly, you have never met a species quite like us. He turned slowly, addressing not just the tribunal but every being in the chamber. Humanity does not surrender. We do not submit. We do not bow. You can send your fleets. You can point your weapons at our world, but know this with absolute certainty. If you come for Earth, we will fight you. We will fight you with everything we have. We will make you pay for every inch of our soil in blood, and even if you destroy us, we will make sure you remember us forever. The chamber remained silent as turned back to face. So what will it be, High Chancellor? War with a species that has nothing to lose? Or perhaps, for the first time in 10,000 years, you could try something different? His black eyes bored into us. What are you suggesting? Actual diplomacy. Not threats and demands, but genuine negotiation. Treat us as equals and we might find common ground. Continue treating us as slaves and you will find out exactly why humanity still exists. The High Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, his lipless mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You are either very brave or very foolish, Ambassador. Met his gaze without wavering. Humanity has always been a little bit of both. The Council's response came faster than anyone expected. Within 1 hour of refusal, High Chancellor issued the order that had ended countless civilizations before. 300 warships were dispatched toward Earth with weapons fully charged and crews ready for battle. Fleet Commander led the assault force. He was a reptilian being with green scales and teeth like daggers. In his 200 years of service, he had never lost a battle. He had crushed rebellions on 17 worlds. He had reduced entire cities to ash with a single command. The idea that a primitive species could resist the Council's might was laughable to him. Set course for the human, ordered from his command throne. Maximum speed. I want this finished before their sun sets. His ships moved through space like a swarm of metal predators. Each vessel was armed with weapons that could level mountains. Together, they represented enough firepower to end human civilization in hours. The Council had used such fleets before. No species had ever survived their approach. But the Council did not know about the defiance. 50 years ago, a damaged alien ship had crashed in the remote mountains of northern Russia. The governments of Earth had worked together in secret to recover the wreckage and study its technology. What they found changed everything. Weapons that made nuclear bombs look like toys. Shields that could stop almost any attack. Engines that could cross solar systems in days instead of years. For 5 decades, humanity had prepared. They built warships in hidden facilities on the dark side of the moon. They trained crews for a war they hoped would never come. They developed weapons based on alien technology, then improved them in ways the original designers never imagined. Now that secret fleet waited in the shadow of Mars, watching the Council Armada approach. Admiral stood on the bridge of the EDS Defiance, Earth's flagship. Around him, officers from every nation on Earth worked together with quiet efficiency. Lieutenant Commander Amy monitored the tactical displays. Commander Carlos handled communications. Lieutenant tracked the enemy fleet's approach. Admiral reported, Council fleet is entering the outer solar system. 300 confirmed vessels. They will reach Earth in approximately 4 hours. Nodded slowly. He was calm despite the enormity of what was about to happen. He had waited his entire career for this moment. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led here. Send the signal, he ordered. Wake up the fleet. Across the solar system, hidden ships came to life. 200 vessels emerged from their hiding places behind moons and asteroids. They were smaller than the Council ships, but they were faster and more maneuverable, and they carried weapons that would shock the galaxy. Open a channel to the Council fleet, said. Fleet Commander's face appeared on the main screen. His reptilian features showed amusement as he studied the human before him. Primitive vessels detected, said, his tongue flicking between his words. This is entertaining. You actually built ships. How adorable. He leaned forward with a predator's smile. Surrender now and your population will merely be enslaved rather than exterminated. This is more mercy than you deserve. Remained perfectly still. I am going to give you one chance, Commander. Turn your fleet around and return to Council space. Leave humanity alone and we can pretend this never happened. His laughter was harsh and clicking. Your species truly is as irrational as the reports suggested. We have 300 ships. You have barely half that number. Our weapons can shatter moons. Your technology is centuries behind ours. He raised one clawed hand. All ships fire at will. 300 warships unleashed their weapons at once. Plasma bolts that burned hotter than stars, graviton beams that could crush metal like paper, antimatter torpedoes that destroyed everything they touched. The combined firepower streaked toward Earth's defensive line in a wave of destruction. None of it connected. The barrier shimmered into existence between the fleets. It was humanity's greatest achievement, a network of satellites that had taken 30 years to build and position. Working together, they projected an energy shield that surrounded the entire inner solar system. The Council's weapons hit this shield and simply disappeared, absorbed like rain falling into an ocean. On his command ship, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His weapons had struck nothing, not deflected, not weakened, simply absorbed as if they had never existed. What is this? He demanded. What did you do? His image appeared on screen. The human admiral was smiling slightly, the expression carrying no warmth. That was your one chance, said quietly. You should have taken it. Now it is our turn. The Defiance fired a single shot, a beam of concentrated energy that Council scientists would later say was impossible according to known physics. It punched through his flagship like a needle through cloth, entering at the bow and exiting at the stern. The massive warship broke apart in a silent explosion, scattering debris across thousands of miles of space. Fleet Commander died, without ever understanding what had killed him. All ships ordered, engage the enemy. What followed would be studied by military historians for centuries. The Council fleet, designed to intimidate and overwhelm, found itself facing an enemy that fought nothing like any species they had encountered before. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, protecting each other while targeting enemy vessels with surgical precision. They did not try to match the Council's firepower. Instead, they used speed and tactics to tear the larger fleet apart piece by piece. In the Council chamber, the High Tribunal watched the battle through a quantum link that showed events in real time. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence as their invincible armada crumbled. High Chancellor's silver skin had gone pale. His 4 hands gripped his throne so tightly that the stone cracked beneath his fingers. This was not possible. It could not be happening. 300 ships had never failed against any enemy. Ambassador stood at the center of the chamber, watching the same display as everyone else. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "We did not come here to negotiate our surrender, High Chancellor. We came to deliver a message." Tore his eyes from the display showing his fleet's destruction. What message? His voice was barely a whisper. "Earth is not your territory," said. "It never will be, and any species that threatens our people will learn exactly why humanity survived when so many others did not." On the battlefield, the last council ships were retreating. Of the 300 that had come to enslave Earth, only 47 escaped. The rest floated as wreckage among the asteroids, monuments to a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Admiral watched them flee. He felt no joy in the victory, only a grim satisfaction that his people had survived. The price of freedom was always paid in blood, and today the Council had paid more than they ever expected. Admiral reported quietly, "The enemy is in full retreat. Earth is secure." Nodded slowly. "Send a message to Geneva. Tell them the fleet held. Tell them Earth is safe." He paused, looking out at the stars that now seemed less threatening than before. "Tell them humanity is still standing." In the council chamber, finished delivering his message to the assembled representatives. "We did not claw our way to the top of our food chain by being gentle creatures. We did not survive ice ages, plagues, and our own weapons of mass destruction by submitting to authority. We are humanity. We fight. We survive. We win." He met black eyes without fear, "And we bow to no one." The chamber was completely silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had been defeated. A species they had dismissed as primitive had done what no other civilization had managed in all their history. They had said no, and they had made it stick. The news of the Council fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with access to communications networks heard the story within hours. A primitive civilization from an unremarkable planet had done what none of them had dared to attempt. They had fought back against the Council and won. On hundreds of worlds, beings who had lived under Council rule for generations stopped what they were doing and listened. Some refused to believe it at first. The Council was eternal. The Council was invincible. The Council could not be defeated. But the evidence was undeniable. 300 warships had gone to Earth. 47 had returned. The rest were debris floating in a distant solar system. For many conquered species, this was the first spark of hope they had felt in centuries. On Earth, the reaction was more complicated. President Collins addressed a global audience from the White House, knowing that billions of people were watching and waiting for her words. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Earlier today, a fleet of alien warships attempted to subjugate our world. They came expecting easy conquest. They found something very different." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Our defense forces met the enemy in battle and achieved a decisive victory. Earth is safe. Humanity remains free." The cheering that followed could be heard around the world. People poured into streets in every major city, celebrating a victory that most had not even known was being fought. Flags waved. Songs were sung. Strangers hugged each other and wept with relief. But Collins was not finished. "We did not seek this conflict. We asked only to be left in peace to make our own choices about our future. We will not apologize for defending ourselves. We will not pretend to be weak when we are strong." Her eyes hardened slightly. "But neither will we become conquerors ourselves. Humanity does not seek empire. We seek only freedom for ourselves and for any species willing to stand with us." These words would echo across the galaxy in the days to come. Meanwhile, Ambassador remained on the council station under uncertain circumstances. He was given quarters befitting a diplomat, but guards were posted at his door. Whether he was a guest or a prisoner was never made clear, and he suspected that the council itself had not yet decided. Dr. Helen Park spent her days meeting with representatives from other species. She moved through the station carefully, always accompanied by Captain Torres, talking with anyone willing to speak with her. What she learned was both troubling and encouraging. "There are resistance movements," she reported to during one of their private conversations. "Dozens of them spread across council space. Species that were conquered centuries ago never stopped dreaming of freedom. They have been waiting for something like this, a crack in the council's armor, a sign that resistance is possible." Considered this carefully. "We are not looking to lead a revolution, Helen. Earth barely survived one battle. We cannot fight the entire council." "Maybe not," Park replied, "but you might have started a revolution anyway, whether we wanted to or not." The truth of her words became clear as reports came in from across the galaxy. 3 species had already declared independence from the council. 2 more were on the verge of civil war. And someone, somewhere, had begun broadcasting recordings of speech to every corner of known space. "We are humanity, we bow to no one." Those words had become a battle cry. The council itself was fracturing. The High Tribunal had ruled through 2 things, fear and the appearance of invincibility. Both had been shattered in a single day. Representatives who had obeyed without question for generations were now asking uncomfortable questions. If the humans could resist, why had their own species surrendered? If the council could be defeated, did they really need to keep paying tribute? High Chancellor summoned for a private meeting 3 days after the battle. The silver-skinned alien looked diminished somehow. His 4 arms hung at his sides instead of moving with authority. His black eyes showed something had not seen before: doubt. "Your species has created chaos," said. "The stability of 300 worlds is threatened. Systems that have been at peace for are now questioning their relationship with the council. You have done more damage with one battle than any enemy has done in 10,000 years." Remained standing, refusing the seat that was offered. "With respect, High Chancellor, that stability was built on fear and oppression. Any system that depends on those things is always one battle away from collapse. We did not create your problems. We just exposed them." Slipless mouth tightened. "And you believe humanity can survive what comes next? The fleet we sent against you was a small portion of our total military strength. We could send 10 times that number, 100 times." Met his gaze steadily. "Then you would lose 10 times as many ships, 100 times as many." He shook his head slowly. "But I do not think you will do that. You are a practical being, High Chancellor. You have to be to rule this long, and practical beings do not waste resources on fights they cannot win." The silence stretched between them, was not accustomed to being challenged. For 10,000 years, his word had been law. Now a human from a primitive world was standing in his private chamber telling him uncomfortable truths. "What do you want?" finally asked. "Your species has proven it cannot be conquered easily. So what are your demands? Territory, resources, tribute from other species?" Shook his head. "We want nothing that belongs to others. We simply want to be left alone to make our own choices about our future. Trade with us fairly or do not trade at all. Speak with us as equals or do not speak at all. That is what we want." "And the other species, the ones who are now rebelling because of your example?" Was quiet for a moment. This was the question he had been dreading. Earth was not ready to lead a galactic revolution. They had won one battle against an overconfident enemy. They could not protect hundreds of worlds from council retaliation. "We cannot speak for them," he said carefully. "Every species must make its own choice about its future, but I will say this. If the council responds to their demands with violence, humanity will remember. And the next time you send a fleet to our solar system, it might not be to conquer Earth. It might be to defend it from us." Back on Earth, Admiral was receiving the same troubling intelligence. The galaxy was in turmoil. Species that had been obedient for centuries were rising up. Fleets were being mobilized on both sides. The balance of power that had held for 10,000 years was crumbling. General Victor joined on the observation deck of the Defiance. The two men had known each other for decades. They had trained together, fought together, and planned for this moment together. Now they stood watching Earth turn slowly below them, wondering what came next. "We just wanted to be free," said quietly. "We never asked for any of this." "That is usually how revolutions start," replied. "One group decides they would rather die than submit. Then others realize they feel the same way. It spreads like fire." He looked out at the stars. "You cannot start a fire and then complain when it burns." "So what do we do now?" Was silent for a long moment. "We prepare. We build more ships, train more crews, develop better weapons, because whether we like it or not, we are now a power in this galaxy. We have enemies who want us destroyed. We have potential allies who are looking to us for guidance." He turned to face directly. "We cannot hide anymore. The universe knows we are here. Now we have to decide what kind of presence we are going to be." On the council station, Dr. Park made her final report before they departed for Earth. She had spent weeks collecting stories from conquered species. Tales of oppression, of forced labor, of entire civilizations stripped of their identity and pride. "They call us the Hope species now," she told him. "Beings I have never met from worlds I cannot pronounce are naming their children after human heroes. We have become a symbol of something larger than ourselves." Looked out the window at the stars that surrounded them. Somewhere among those points of light, humanity's future was being written. "I just hope we can live up to it," he said. 1 year had passed since humanity shocked the galaxy by defeating the Council fleet. In that time, everything had changed. The old order that had ruled for 10,000 years was crumbling. New powers were rising, and at the center of it all stood Earth, a world that had gone from unknown to legendary in a matter of months. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of what it had been. More than half its member species had withdrawn or been granted independence. The High Tribunal had been dissolved after 3 of its 5 members were removed by their own people. High Chancellor had retired quietly, his last official act being a formal apology to the species his rule had oppressed. In its place, something new was growing. The Interstellar Congress met for the first time on a space station orbiting a neutral star. Representatives from 60 species filled the chamber, a fraction of the old council's membership, but united by something far stronger than fear. They had chosen to be there. They had chosen to work together. That made all the difference. Ambassador Daniel stood at the central podium, looking out at the assembly he had helped create. 1 year ago, he had been just another diplomat from an unknown world. Now he was considered one of the founders of a new galactic order. The responsibility weighed on him, but he carried it willingly. "We gather here today not as conquerors and conquered," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Not as masters and servants. We gather as equals, each species with its own voice, its own vote, its own right to determine its future." The representatives listened in silence. Many of them had never been allowed to speak freely before. The council had demanded obedience, not opinions. Here, in this new assembly, every voice mattered. "Humanity did not reject diplomacy when we stood before the old council," continued. "We rejected submission disguised as diplomacy. We rejected the idea that strength gives anyone the right to dominate others. We rejected a system that treated entire civilizations as resources to be exploited." He paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. "What we build together in this place will be different. It will be based on mutual respect, fair dealing, and the understanding that every species has something valuable to contribute. We will disagree sometimes. We will argue about policies and priorities. That is natural and healthy. But we will never again accept a system where some beings are considered more worthy than others simply because they have more ships or bigger weapons. On Earth, the changes were equally dramatic. The planet that had hidden in fear of the stars was now at the center of galactic trade and diplomacy. Ships from dozens of worlds visited daily, bringing goods and knowledge that would have seemed like magic just a few years earlier. President Collins had been by the largest margin in history. Her steady leadership during the crisis had made her a global hero. Now she worked to ensure that humanity's success did not corrupt them the way power had corrupted the Council. "We must remember who we are," she told her advisors during a late-night meeting. "We fought for freedom, not dominion. If we become the thing we defeated, we will have lost something far more valuable than any battle." Admiral remained in command of Earth's fleet, which had grown to 500 vessels. The Defiance was still his flagship, though it had been upgraded with new technologies shared by allied species. Young officers from across the galaxy now served alongside human crews, learning from each other and building bonds that would last generations. Lieutenant Commander Amy had been promoted to captain, commanding her own ship on patrol near Council space. She thought often about how much had changed since that first battle. They had been so afraid, so uncertain of their place in the universe. Now they patrolled the stars as protectors rather than defenders. "We never wanted this power," she told a young alien officer who served under her. "We just wanted to be left alone. But sometimes history chooses you whether you want it or not. The only question is what you do with the responsibility." Dr. Helen Park had stayed on the Council station, now renamed Freedom Station by popular vote. She ran an institute dedicated to preserving the languages and cultures of species that had been forced to abandon their heritage under Council rule. Every day, she helped beings reconnect with traditions their grandparents had been forbidden to practice. A young alien child approached her one afternoon while she was working in her office. The child's species had been conquered 300 years ago. Their original language had nearly been lost. "Is it true," the child asked, "that humans have a word for refusing to obey?" Park smiled warmly and knelt down to meet the child's eyes. "We have several words for it: defiance, rebellion, independence, resistance." She placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. "But my favorite is simply no. It is a small word, just 2 letters, but it changed everything." The child's eyes widened with wonder. "Can you teach me to say it?" "Of course, and someday you will teach others." Back on Earth, General Victor had retired from active service. He spent his days writing a history of humanity's transformation from isolated planet to galactic power. He wanted future generations to understand how close they had come to losing everything, and how ordinary people had found the courage to stand against impossible odds. "We did not have better weapons," he wrote. "We did not have superior numbers. We did not have ancient wisdom or magical powers. We had only one thing that the Council did not expect. We had the stubborn refusal to accept that our fate could be decided by others. We had the belief, passed down through generations, that freedom is worth any price." The first anniversary of the Battle of Earth was celebrated across the galaxy. On every allied world, beings gathered to remember the day everything changed. They lit candles. They told stories. They named children after human heroes whose names they had learned to pronounce. President Collins gave an address from Geneva that was broadcast to every corner of known space. "1 year ago, we stood at the edge of destruction. An empire that had ruled for 10,000 years demanded our submission. They expected us to bow. They expected us to kneel. They expected us to surrender everything that makes us who we are." She paused, looking into the camera with eyes that had seen humanity's darkest hour and its greatest triumph. "Instead, we said no." That single word, spoken with conviction, changed the course of history. Not just human history, but galactic history. Because when one species proves that tyranny can be resisted, others find the courage to do the same. Across the galaxy, beings of all shapes and sizes watched her speak. Many had tears in their eyes. Others raised their hands in salute to a planet they had never visited but would always remember. "We stand today not as conquerors," Collins continued, "but as equals among equals. We did not seek power. We did not ask to lead. But we accept the responsibility that history has given us, and we promise to every species that shares our belief in freedom that humanity will never forget what we fought for." Ambassador watched the address from Freedom Station, surrounded by delegates from the Interstellar Congress. Beside him stood representatives from species that had been enemies under the old order. Now they worked together, argued together, and built something new together. "Do you think it will last?" asked one of the alien delegates. "This new order you have created. The Council ruled for 10,000 years. How long can an alliance based on freedom survive?" Thought about the question carefully before answering. It was a fair concern. History was full of revolutions that had been corrupted by their own success, liberators who had become tyrants, freedom fighters who had become oppressors. "I do not know how long it will last," he admitted. "No one can predict the future. But I know this. Every generation will have to choose again whether freedom is worth fighting for. As long as there are beings willing to say no to tyranny, as long as there are species willing to stand up for their right to choose their own destiny, this alliance will survive." He looked out the window at the stars that surrounded them. Somewhere among those distant lights, new civilizations were being born. Some would join the Congress. Others would chart their own course. All of them would live in a galaxy that humanity had helped to reshape. "We did not change the universe," said quietly. "We just reminded it of something it had forgotten, that the power to rule does not come from weapons or wealth. It comes from the consent of those being ruled. Take that away, and even the mightiest empire will fall." The stars twinkled in the eternal darkness, witnesses to a story that was still being written. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe. They had made mistakes and achieved miracles. They had found enemies and made friends. And through it all, they had remained true to the simple belief that had defined them since their earliest ancestors first looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They were humanity. They would fight. They would survive. They would win. And they would bow to no one.